The void of space rippled with tension as the Zarkak's battlecruiser Dominance drifted through the Orion Arm, its obsidian hull absorbing and reflecting starlight like a predatory shadow. Captain Rixtal's 6 eyes, each a marvel of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement, scanned the unexpected anomaly that had triggered their long-range sensors. A human research vessel. Barely larger than a Zarkak's personal shuttle, the craft looked absurdly fragile. Its hull bore a chaotic pattern of colors that defied military camouflage protocols, splashes of crimson, electric blue, and a vibrant green that seemed to mock the serious business of interstellar exploration. A stylized stick figure adorned its side, caught mid-motion in what appeared to be an impossibly precarious position. Tactical analysis, Rixtal commanded, his voice a low resonant click that vibrated through the ship's bioorganic communication network. Sub-Commander Nexra's neural implants flickered with data streams. Vessel configuration. Research module. Minimal defensive capabilities. Crew complement. 12 humans. No active weapon systems detected. Recommendation. Standard containment and interrogation protocol. Rixtal's secondary mandibles, used for intricate communication among his species, twitched with a mixture of contempt and anticipation. The Zarkak's Imperium had conquered 63 sentient civilizations across 3 galactic clusters. This would be 64. What neither Rixtal nor Nexra understood was the nature of the stick figure on the hull. It wasn't just a random decoration. It was a rock climber, perched on a near-vertical cliff face, capturing a moment of controlled chaos that would become a metaphor for humanity's entire existence. Inside the research vessel, Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her safety harness, more out of professional habit than actual necessity. She'd survived far more dangerous situations before breakfast. The ship's sensors had detected the Zarkak's vessel long before the aliens believed themselves undetected. "Looks like we've got company," she said casually to her team, her tone suggesting they might as well have spotted a mildly interesting cloud formation. Jack Thompson, the mission's security specialist, didn't even look up from his data tablet. "Warrior race," he muttered. "Bet they've got some impressive genetic modifications." Beside him, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura chuckled. A veteran of multiple extreme environment research expeditions, he'd seen his share of supposedly intimidating species. Modifications are one thing. Adaptability is another. The human vessel made no move to escape. No emergency protocols activated. Instead, they continued their research, collecting quantum entanglement data from a nearby neutron star, work so complex and dangerous that most species wouldn't dare attempt it. On the Zarkak's bridge, Captain Rixtal prepared the standard approach protocols. Technological suppression fields would disable the human vessel's systems. Boarding teams stood ready, their biomechanical exo-armor capable of crushing most known species into submission within moments of first contact. What the Zarkaks didn't know was that the humans had already run 17 different scenario analyses, each more unpredictable than the last. Their research vessel was anything but defenseless. The stick figure on the hull wasn't just a decoration. It was a statement. Humanity was coming, and their idea of first contact was nothing like anyone expected. As the Zarkak's battlecruiser prepared to initiate containment protocols, the human vessel's systems hummed with a quiet, almost playful energy. No alarms, no panic. Just the calm preparation of a species that saw potential alien invasion as nothing more than an interesting problem to solve. First contact was about to become something entirely different, something the Zarkaks could never have prepared for. The Zarkak's Central Intelligence Complex sprawled across an entire moon, a labyrinthine network of quantum processors and bioneural interfaces that had processed information from thousands of conquered civilizations. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared them for human communication intercepts. Analyst Vexna's tentacle-like data manipulators trembled as she processed the latest batch of intercepted human communications. Her translation matrix, capable of deciphering 2,743 known linguistic patterns, seemed to short-circuit with each new discovery. Recreational danger, she whispered to her senior director, a veteran intelligence officer with centuries of experience cataloging alien species. The holographic displays flickered with images that defied all rational military understanding. Humans hurling themselves from perfectly functional aircraft, suspended by nothing more than thin pieces of fabric. Individuals scaling vertical rock faces with minimal protection. Humans intentionally swimming near massive ocean predators that could eviscerate them in milliseconds. One particular communication log became an obsession for the intelligence team. "Bro, this weekend's base jump was insane. Almost didn't make the cliff." The word almost became a point of intense psychological study. In most species, almost didn't survive would trigger immediate trauma response, weeks of psychological rehabilitation, complete behavioral recalibration. For humans, it appeared to be casual conversation. Director Krull Max reviewed the data, his neural implants working overtime. Decades of studying conquered civilizations had taught him that every species had predictable stress responses, threat detection, fight or flight mechanisms, psychological breaking points. Humans seemed to have weaponized stress itself. Sports files revealed entire human industries dedicated to manufacturing controlled danger. They didn't just tolerate risk, they celebrated it. Extreme marathons through scorching deserts, climbing impossible mountain faces, diving into underwater caves with minimal equipment. One particularly disturbing video showed a human variation called free soloing, scaling massive cliff faces without any safety equipment. No ropes, no protective gear, just human flesh against stone, defying every known survival algorithm. The Zarkax began to realize these weren't outliers. These were cultural practices. Vexna compiled a report that would be discussed in intelligence circles for generations. Her conclusion was simple and terrifying. Humans did not view danger as a threat. They viewed it as a form of entertainment. The diplomatic shuttle arrived like a precision-engineered weapon of intimidation. 3 Zarkax warriors dominated the compact space, each standing 2.5 meters tall, their bodies a canvas of genetic modifications that transformed them into living arsenals. Muscle groups interlinked with quantum-responsive neural networks, redundant organs, reinforced skeletal structures that could withstand atmospheric entry without protective gear. They expected total capitulation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez greeted them wearing what appeared to be casual clothing, cargo pants with multiple inexplicable pockets, a lightweight jacket that seemed more suited to a mild outdoor activity than a first contact scenario. Visible scars traced her arms and face, each a testament to experiences that would have killed most species multiple times over. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying the casual tone of someone inviting guests for afternoon tea. "Would you like some coffee?" The beverage she referenced was a stimulant so potent it would kill most known alien species. The Zarkax warriors' biomonitors immediately began tracking its composition, detecting caffeine levels that would trigger cardiac arrest in 99.7% of sentient beings. Sub-Commander Vornak, lead diplomatic enforcer of the Zarkax expedition, attempted to initiate standard psychological intimidation protocols. Trained to break the mental resistance of countless species, he deployed a vocal frequency proven to trigger submission responses in 612 documented civilizations. Elena took another sip of coffee. "Sorry about the mess," she added, gesturing to a wall covered with what appeared to be climbing equipment, medical trauma kits, and what looked suspiciously like preserved venomous animal specimens. "Just got back from my morning routine." The morning routine, which the diplomatic logs would later meticulously document, involved a 20-kilometer trail run through mountainous terrain, free solo rock climbing without safety gear, a swim with great white sharks, emergency medical training simulation. The Zarkax warriors' collective threat assessment algorithms began to overheat. Jack Thompson, standing nearby, didn't help matters. When asked about potential security arrangements, he casually mentioned his previous occupation, spent a few years with special forces, mostly did wilderness survival instruction. You know, the usual. The usual for humans, they were discovering, was anything but usual. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura joined the conversation, reviewing some data on a tablet. Interesting quantum fluctuations near the neutron star, he mumbled, as if discussing the weather, not a research location that would vaporize most species instantaneously. Vornak's communication implants struggled to process the human's complete lack of standard threat response. No elevated heart rates, no defensive posturing, just casual existence. One of the junior Zarkax attaches, unable to control this biological response, produced a subtle pheromone of pure, unadulterated confusion. The humans didn't even notice. More coffee? Elena asked, lifting the thermos. The diplomatic mission was approximately 7 minutes old, and the Zarkax were already reconsidering every known principle of interspecies communication. Humanity wasn't just another species to be studied. They were something else entirely. Human military training videos became the most terrifying intelligence discovery in Zarkax historical records, where their own training involved precise, calculated movements executed with mathematical perfection. Human training looked like controlled pandemonium, a symphony of chaos that defied every known military doctrine. The first classified file came from Navy SEAL training archives. Initial analysis suggested it was some form of ritualistic torture or punishment. Subsequent review revealed it was, in fact, voluntary training. Candidates voluntarily experienced hypothermia. They stayed conscious underwater far beyond physiological limits. They carried impossible weights through environments that would kill most species within minutes. They didn't just train. They seemed to celebrate pushing their bodies to absolute failure and then recovering. Training Scenario Alpha 7 became a particular point of obsessive study for Zarkax military intelligence. Candidates were dropped into the Alaska wilderness during winter. Temperatures reached -40 degrees. Survival gear was minimal. The objective: survive 48 hours while completing a series of increasingly complex tasks. Most species would have died within hours. These humans treated it like an inconvenient camping trip. One training video featured an instructor shouting a phrase that initially confounded all translation matrices: "Embrace the suck." After months of linguistic and cultural analysis, the closest interpretation wasn't just "endure difficulty," but something far more profound. It meant transforming suffering into a form of personal growth, turning pain into a tool of psychological development. The Zarkax had spent millennia developing training protocols that created perfect warriors through genetic modification and neural conditioning. Humans were creating warriors through something far more terrifying: choice. Their training wasn't about eliminating weakness. It was about choosing to overcome it. Psychological profiles revealed something even more disturbing. These weren't just soldiers. They were ordinary humans who volunteered for these experiences. People from diverse backgrounds, teachers, engineers, farmers, willingly subjecting themselves to conditions that would break most professional military units. A particularly illuminating document described a training exercise where candidates were required to navigate through 60 kilometers of jungle terrain, carry a 45-kilogram pack, solve complex mathematical problems, evade detection by advanced tracking systems, survive on minimal rations. The kicker: this was a training exercise, not an actual combat scenario. One captured training manual contained a series of instructions that made Zarkax neural networks short-circuit. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. The human body can withstand and adapt to significantly more than most people realize. Your mind is the limit. Everything else is negotiable. These weren't just instructions. They were a philosophical manifesto of human potential. The Zarkax began to realize they weren't preparing to face a military. They were preparing to face a species that had weaponized personal growth. and they were terrified. The Zarkax brought their most terrifying psychological warfare specialists to the diplomatic summit. These were not mere interrogators. They were living weapons of mental destruction, beings who could make most species surrender through pure psychological manipulation. Commander Zexral led the team. His neural implants could detect and exploit the slightest psychological vulnerability. He had broken civilizations without firing a single weapon, dismantling their will to resist through pure mental warfare. Jack Thompson, the human diplomatic security specialist, represented humanity's response. When the Zarkax specialists began their standard psychological probing, a technique that had reduced entire planetary governments to trembling submission, Thompson seemed almost amused. "Let me tell you about my weekend," he said casually. What followed was a narrative that would be studied in Zarkax intelligence circles for generations. A solo expedition through the Amazon rainforest. Not a research mission. Not a military operation. A personal adventure. He described being stalked by jaguars, surviving a flash flood by constructing an emergency shelter from local materials, and treating a venomous snake bite by himself, using nothing more than a basic medical kit and knowledge gained from wilderness survival courses. The Zarkax psychological team's neural interfaces began to overheat. Thompson punctuated his story by taking another sip of coffee, a beverage that would kill most alien species within seconds of consumption. The most disturbing part wasn't the story itself. It was Thompson's tone. Complete calm. No hint of trauma. No indication that what he described was anything more than a mildly interesting weekend activity. Zexral's primary communication tendrils began to involuntarily twitch, a sign of extreme psychological stress among his species. Their standard interrogation protocols relied on creating scenarios of mounting psychological pressure. Break the subject's mental resistance through carefully constructed stress scenarios. Make them believe escape was impossible. Humans, they were discovering, didn't just resist psychological pressure. They welcomed it. Further investigation revealed entire human industries dedicated to manufactured stress experiences. Escape rooms where people paid money to be intentionally confined and challenged. Survival camps where individuals voluntarily experienced harsh environmental conditions. Extreme sports that pushed human physiology to its absolute limits. These weren't outliers. They were cultural practices. The Zarkax psychological warfare team requested immediate medical evaluation. Their neural systems simply could not process the data they were receiving. Humanity wasn't just resistant to psychological warfare. They had transformed psychological challenges into a form of entertainment. One intercepted human communication became a particular point of fascination. A group of humans discussing a challenging experience. Dude, that was brutal. Totally awesome, right? The translation matrices struggled. Brutal typically indicated something negative. Awesome suggested something positive. Used together, they defied all known linguistic and psychological logic. When actual combat began, the universe held its collective breath. The battlefield was a neutron star's accretion disk, a location so hostile that most species wouldn't even consider military engagement. Radiation levels that would vaporize conventional shielding. Gravitational forces that could crush matter into subatomic particles. Temporal distortions that made linear movement impossible. The Zarkax fleet arrived with mathematical precision. 63 battlecruisers, 12 support vessels, quantum-locked weapon systems that could obliterate planetary surfaces, genetic warriors bred for 1,000 generations of combat, their bodies living weapons of unprecedented sophistication. They expected total annihilation. What they encountered defied every known principle of warfare. Human forces didn't just defend, they played. Commander Elena Rodriguez's tactical approach seemed less like military strategy and more like an elaborate, deadly game of three-dimensional chess. Where Zarkax warriors had predetermined combat algorithms, humans innovated with a fluidity that bordered on the supernatural. A human frigate, critically damaged, didn't retreat. Instead, it used its failing reactor as a weapon, converting a potential disaster into a tactical nuclear strike that eliminated 3 Zarkax destroyers. The pilot's last transmission wasn't a desperate call for help. It was a sardonic laugh. Jack Thompson, leading a small special operations team, found himself surrounded by overwhelming Zarkax forces in a narrow asteroid canyon. Standard military doctrine would suggest immediate surrender or desperate last-stand tactics. Thompson's response was to ask his team, "You guys want to see something cool?" What followed was a tactical maneuver so audacious, so completely outside any known combat paradigm, that Zarkax military historians would study it for generations. Using the asteroid's unique magnetic properties, minimal equipment, and what could only be described as weaponized improvisation, Thompson's team not only survived, but turned a certain defeat into a complete strategic victory. The Zarkax discovered that human warfare wasn't about following rules. It was about breaking them in the most spectacular way possible. Weapon systems that would have been war-ending against any other species became mere inconveniences. Radiation levels that should have been instantly fatal became challenging environmental conditions. Gravitational forces that would crush most ships became opportunities for innovative navigation. One Zarkax tactical analyst, watching the human response, had a neural breakdown. His last coherent transmission was a simple phrase that would become legendary. "They're enjoying this." And they were. Humans didn't just fight. They transformed warfare into the ultimate extreme sport. The final battle became less a military engagement and more a performance of human psychological resilience that would be remembered across galaxies. Surrounded, outgunned, in an environment that should have killed them a dozen times over, human forces didn't just survive. They thrived. Captain Rixtal watched from the Zarkax command vessel, his 6 eyes unable to process the tactical impossibilities unfolding before him. Human ships moved with a combination of mathematical precision and what could only be described as creative chaos. They didn't just use standard evasive maneuvers, they invented new ones in real time. A human destroyer, critically damaged, used its failing systems to create a gravitational lens effect that turned enemy weapon trajectories into harmless light shows. Another vessel, losing power, converted its life support systems into a makeshift electromagnetic pulse that disabled entire Zarkax battle groups. The humans treated total tactical defeat as nothing more than an interesting problem to solve. Communication intercepts revealed something even more terrifying. While under extreme combat conditions, human crews were sharing jokes, discussing future plans, arguing about mundane topics like food preferences and entertainment schedules. They weren't just fighting a war. They were living through it. Zarkax warriors, bred for combat, programmed for total war, began to experience something unprecedented: existential doubt. The humans didn't just break military doctrine. They rewrote the entire concept of warfare. Strategic analysis would later reveal that human victory wasn't achieved through superior technology or genetic modification. It was achieved through something far more terrifying: adaptive creativity. The Zarkax surrender wasn't just a military defeat. It was a fundamental psychological capitulation that would reshape galactic understanding of sentient conflict. Their final report was a document that would be studied for generations. Humans do not experience stress as a negative condition. They experience it as a form of stimulation. Diplomatic archives would later record the most chilling moment of first contact. During the surrender negotiations, a human representative, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, looked at the Zarkax commanders and said something that would become legendary. "Next time, let's do this somewhere more interesting." The universe would never be the same. Humanity wasn't just another species to be encountered. They were a force of nature that happened to be sentient. The end.